Hi, it's Laura at Aquamarine18. Thanks for stopping by. I am here with the second last installment of 31 Days of Witchcraft, the tag hosted by Heather Carter throughout the month of May 2020. I'll link to Heather's video explaining the tag below, though I'm sure everyone's figured it out now that it's almost over. So, Day 30's prompt is, how do you feel about the popularization of witchcraft in social media? I want to start by saying that I don't actually participate in much social media. Obviously, I have this YouTube channel. Whether YouTube actually qualifies as a social media site is actually somewhat debated, depending on how you define social media and what its primary functions have to be. But I have this YouTube channel, and I do socialize on YouTube. I comment on others' videos, I make comments on my own platform, and so on. I also have an Instagram that I don't use particularly actively. I like scrolling a little bit. I like posting pictures of cards and of cats, mostly. But I don't use Facebook. I don't use Twitter. So my social media engagement overall is quite low. I don't follow a lot of witchcraft on social media, other than the handful of channels on YouTube that I subscribe to that touch on witchcraft or focus on witchcraft. But all in all, this is not the space that I'm having those conversations a lot of the time. So in some ways I feel ill-equipped to answer this question because I don't have a whole bunch of examples of witchcraft on social media to talk about, right? So I thought that I would take a different angle and talk about popularization on social media in general and what it entails, and then maybe ask, some questions based on that. So I will say, I feel like this could be a contentious discussion depending on what all gets said. I don't think what I have to say is going to be too contentious, but we'll see. So I want to ask the question, right, of what determines what gets popular in a social media environment, right? Popularization in social media, how does it happen, right? And there are a lot of factors at play here. And I'm going to speak in the most general terms, not about any particular site necessarily, but in general, right? In terms of what gets popularized on social media, there's a lot of money involved. There is the capability of buying visibility and popularity in various kinds of ways, whether that's buying ad space, whether that is, paying to have your page on Facebook shown to particular groups of people, so on, right? Lots and lots of money. And we have to remember that social media sites are corporate entities, right? Their function is to make money above other functions. A lot of what gets popular on social media sites is determined by algorithms that we as users have often very little understanding of, let alone control over, right? And algorithms that have been used on social media sites have been criticized for all kinds of reasons, right? And often those algorithms that determine what is popular, what's shown on YouTube trending, for example, these are factors that can be manipulated in various ways, right? The number of views a video has can be manipulated, right? The number of comments, you can boost your numbers of comments in all kinds of ways. So these kinds of trends in terms of what's popular are not reflections of the best or most interesting content circulating the most widely, right? There's a whole lot more at play in terms of what gets popular and what doesn't, right? Including metrics of engagement that may or may not even take into account whether engagement is of quality, right? Thinking about the number of retweets a tweet gets as being some measure of its popularity, even if a bunch of those retweets are critical of that initial tweet. It doesn't mean it's popular in a sense of being agreed with, but it's being circulated, right? Or on YouTube, the number of comments a video gets as part of an algorithm, as opposed to the quality of the comments or the length of the comments or the conversation that comments generate, right? These are quantitative factors, right? That again are manipulable. And so all of these issues about what gets popular and what doesn't, right, are not ultimately questions of quality or degree of knowledgeable, a knowledgeable perspective or anything like that, right? It's a lot of other factors that can be manipulated and can certainly be manipulated with money, right? And I think that needs to be always taken into account when we're assessing content that becomes popular, right? What determines what gets popular? And this is all happening within environments where, as long as you have access to the internet and some basic computer equipment, whether that's a computer or a laptop, or a webcam or a phone, whatever it is, as long as you have that and you have internet access, anyone can produce content on just about anything, right? Within the basic bounds of terms of use of not, uploading pornographic content or something like that. But within those bounds, on social media, you can generally make content about just about anything. You don't need to prove any kind of credentials. You don't need to be put through a peer review process, right? Anybody can make content about anything. And there are certainly pros and cons to that. There's real pros if you think about this as a kind of democratizing of information effect, right? But there's also, of course, the potential for lots of inaccurate information. And there's the potential for a lot of inaccurate information to become popular, right? And not by virtue of its truthfulness, obviously, but by virtue of these other metrics, right? And that's concerning. It's a topic we know of a lot of discussion right now. What degree of liability do sites like Facebook or YouTube have for false or misleading content that's hosted on their platforms, right? When they're hosting platforms that any of us can upload a video like I'm doing now, to what degree are they responsible for someone who, say is posting fraudulent medical information, right? There's all these questions. So, what does any of this have to do with witchcraft, right? Really, what I just wanted to say is what I think about popularization of witchcraft on social media is that we need to be really aware when we're having this conversation about how things get popular, right? And just to keep in mind that things becoming popularized involve a lot of different factors, not all of which are always obvious, not all of which are always even known to us or transparently known to us, and certainly not all of which have to do with things like accuracy or knowledge or, the value of the information, right? And that's in general, that's not just witchcraft. But I think as those of us who are engaging in these kinds of conversations and on different social media sites, talking about whatever it is that we're passionate about, in this case, witchcraft, I think that when it comes to things like popularization on social media, I think that we all need to be really cognizant and mindful of whose voices get amplified in these online spaces and why. Whose voices get silenced in these online spaces and why. What can we do as content creators on the various platforms we might be on to make social media more equitable space in terms of the transmission of knowledge or access to audience, right? How do we make social media spaces safer spaces to engage, right? I'm not going to get into it, but lack of safety is a big part of the reason I'm not on Facebook. I'll just leave it at that. So yeah, I think that these are the things that we need to be thinking about, because I think we can often think about social media as these kind of free marketplaces of ideas where all these kind of ideas just kind of circulate in some kind of, natural way, when they're really spaces that are subject to a lot of manipulation, a lot of distortion, right? And power relations get reproduced in these spaces in various kinds of ways, right? So we need to be really cognizant of that, right? And make content accordingly, consume content accordingly, right? Always be reading with a critical eye and thinking about what's going on, because, and this is what I'll conclude on. I can't believe I've actually made it for 10 minutes on this topic. I feel like all the things I've said about how social media popularization works, these kind of structural components incline social media spaces to be particular sorts of spaces, right? And it might not always be the kind of spaces that we want, right? So it's important to be cognizant of the ways in which the form itself, right, the form of the site itself and how it works is affecting the content we see, is affecting who sees the content we promote, right? These are things to be really aware of, because it's only with awareness of these kind of factors that we can then, I think, most effectively work with social media in the ways that we want to, the best ways that we can, and build social media spaces that we want to be in, that are equitable and safer and positive spaces to be in for folks, and wherein access to power is not the main factor that determines one's ability to be popularized or to be heard. So I'll leave it there, and I will see you tomorrow for the final day of 31 Days of Witchcraft. Thanks for watching.